Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at anonymous types. We're going to learn how to take an anonymous type and convert that into a dictionary so that we can use it within a method. An anonymous type is essentially a way to create and define a class on the fly without actually having to have a concrete implementation of that class. This will allow you to create a class with nothing more than properties. You cannot have a class that contains methods. This is nice and useful because it allows you to create an object on the fly, provide it to a method, and allow that method to decode or decipher the contents of that object as needed. In order to do this, all we have to really do is create a simple helper method, it could also be an extension method, that uses reflection to create and return an object that is of type dictionary. If you've used things such as the ASP.NET MVC framework or various pieces of .NET code that were created after the .NET 3.5 framework was released, you've probably actually used an anonymous type without understanding or knowing what you've done. For example, if I bounce over to this real quick, this is an ASP.NET MVC framework, and I have this HTML Textbox helper. This helper allows me to create and render a standard typical HTML input object. And you'll see here I've got in the name of the text box, and then provided a value. And you'll notice down here I've got a few overloads. One is an object of HTML attributes, and one is an iDictionary. Now, why would I want to use an object versus an iDictionary? An iDictionary is not hard to create, but does create multiple lines of code in order to create one. I've got to instantiate the iDictionary. I've got to do add in order to populate that dictionary. Well, with this overload of object HTML helpers, I can actually create an anonymous type, pass that into it, have it translate the anonymous type into a dictionary for me, and then pass that dictionary along as needed. An anonymous type is defined and declared by doing new and curly brace. Now you'll notice right here I'm not specifying the type. That's because it's an anonymous type. The compiler will actually create an object or a type for you on the fly based on the criteria you provided. So here I've given it an attribute called width and a value, an attribute or property called class and a value. And when rendered in runtime, it'll actually output this following HTML here. Class will be foo, like I told it over here. And by the way, you'll notice I have the @ here. That's because class in HTML is a reserved keyword. So in order to render this correctly, I need to prefix it with the @. And then I'll also come over here and output the width attribute for the HTML. Both those are here. Now if I had provided something that was unknown to HTML or not normal, it would still output that for me because it's part of it and it was turned into a dictionary key value pair, but HTML would just ignore it and move on. So what I'd like to do today is show you how to create a simple helper method that will take an anonymous type and convert it to a dictionary for you. I have a method here called dump dictionary. Dump dictionary will take in a dictionary that is of type string object, so has a key of a string and a value of an object. Let's go ahead and create a real quick test method to do something. So I want to create an anonymous type here. So let's do var and let's do something similar like this. Let's do first name. Let's do age equals 100. So I've created this type. Now, nowhere in code have I declared an object or a class that has these various properties. But with anonymous types, I can create it on the fly. Now, if I want to pass this into dump dictionary and give it a non-type, I can't do that because a non-type is strongly typed of type dictionary. So what I'm going to want to do is actually create a method that will decipher my anonymous type into a dictionary for me and return that value. Let's go ahead and do private iDictionary. Turn so I'll go ahead and create this method here called turn a non-type into dictionary. In order to do this, all I've really got to do is add a few lines of code and use a little bit of reflection. And I can turn this magical anonymous type into a type dictionary. So I'm going to go ahead and create a dictionary that's of the correct type. This is what we want to output, so let's go ahead and do return val. Now in order to do this, I probably want to do something, to be safe and make sure values is not equal null. Because if it is not equal null, well then, or if it is equal to null, then we're just going to have a lot of issues. Now, fortunately for me, I can actually use some reflection and iterate through this object and grab all the properties and all the values out of it. I'm going to go ahead and use this thing in the component model called type descriptor. And I'm going to say get properties. And I'm going to give it my values. And when get properties returned, it's actually going to return an individual instance of a thing called a property descriptor. Property descriptor is also within the component model namespace. Now all I have to do here is do object, and I'll do property.getValues. And I'll return my value, and I'll do something like return value dot add, because I do have a dictionary. I'll do property dot name and my value. So here in about 5 lines of code, I've been able to turn this type of object into a dictionary by iterating through, by grabbing all the properties out of it using reflection, grabbing the value out of that, and stuffing it into my dictionary. Let's go ahead and run this, see what happens. Yep, let's go back up here real quick, and let's do if I put a breakpoint right here, and I'll go ahead and run this, I should be able to convert this into a dictionary and output it. It'll actually iterate through all the properties and spit out all the property and values. So here I have anonymous type. You'll see that it's got an age property, a first name and last name. And here you'll see that I have an actual dictionary of a key value pair, first name Fred, last name Flintstone, age 100. And if I step over this, come down here to my output window, you'll notice down here outputted key is first name, value Fred, key of last name, value Flintstone, age 100. So in a matter of a few lines of code, I've showed you how you can actually use an anonymous type here, convert that into a dictionary, and use that elsewhere. Why would this be useful? Well, there's scenarios such as like in this HTML helper where I can ask the user to create an instance of a dictionary for me and pass it in, or I can allow them to create an anonymous type. And you would do this in a scenario where the possibilities of keys is pretty much endless or limitless. You don't want to create an object. You don't want to maybe create a strongly typed object or use a dictionary like I was saying earlier. You want to allow the user to just define and declare things on the fly. It's pretty powerful, pretty useful. And once you understand how to use it and how it can be done and how you can very simply, with all of half dozen lines of code, turn that anonymous type into an object, you'll find a place to use in your application. So I hope you learned something today. Until next time.